illegal immigration gets lumped into this phrase, like that's the phrase they use, right? Illegal immigration. And it's so much more than that. It's not just illegal immigrants coming through. It's rape, it's murder, it's extortion, it's drug trafficking, it's human trafficking, and they're using American soil to further their activities.
What is maybe the most common misconception about the border?
I think at this point, one of the main stories that we hear that is false is that they're just coming here for a better life. And what we see is not those people. What we deal with now are military age males that are involved in specific things, i.e. transporting drugs or transporting other people, trafficking them. And that is the bulk of what we deal with. So it's not just these poor people escaping something. It is a criminal organization that holds full control of that area. They have unlimited resources, unlimited money, and their violence level is through the roof. They don't care about human life, dude.
Matt Thomas,
How
welcome to the Roller Coaster Podcast.
Thanks, man. Good to be here.
Yeah. August 16, 2024, you said this. You said, don't wait to enjoy life and family. Do it now. Our time is short here on Earth, and in the blink of an eye, it will pass you by.
Oh, man. Yeah.
Why'd you write that?
Ha. Damn, dude. Right out of the gate, you got me. Well, damn. I did not expect this, Tyler. So, I've just seen a lot of death. God dang.
Take your time.
Yeah. Man, I didn't know you were going to kick me in the gut to start with.
That's how we do it.
With my own words, even. Just seen a lot of death, man. Seen a lot of destruction. I've watched, through not only my life, but my career. Just not too long ago, we were on an accident. I just happened to be riding with one of the guys that night, and dude went to get dinner, never came home. And so it's stuff like that, where a guy literally just ran down the street to get dinner to bring back home and eat, and died right there with his dinner sitting next to him. So seeing things like that, experiencing things like that, kind of give you a different perspective on life, I think. And so I think that's where that comment was generated from. Wow.
You've probably, you've been 30 plus years.
Yeah.
Doing very dangerous jobs every day. How do you think you've avoided death in your career? Like you've had so many close calls.
Yeah.
Like where it could have been you in a lot of these scenarios, and for some reason it wasn't. So why wasn't it you?
Because that's not God's plan, man. I've always just felt like no matter how close I was to death, and even death happening all around you, I've never felt like it was my time. And I kind of knew that in the back of my mind, like no matter what we were facing, bullets flying, whatever's going on, I always felt fine because I knew like it's not where I die. So let's just go to work. And I knew that in my heart. And so the only thing I can attribute that to is God, and that he has a plan for me. And I'm a firm believer in our time is, or our ticket's already punched, right? We just don't know the time or date. And so I never really worried about death either, because, it's just one of those things that it'll slow you down when you're doing this kind of work. It can cause you to freeze up. It can cause you to second guess. And I think as I went through my life, as I went through my career, I had a clear understanding in my heart that I was going to be facing death all the time. And when it was my time, it was going to happen. There's nothing I was going to do that's going to stop that. So I just pushed forward. And I always felt like whatever we were facing, that wasn't my spot to die, and just keep going.
Yeah. So I want to do this a little bit chronologically, which is different than what we normally do on the show. Normally on this show, we bounce around, we keep it interesting, but I think for the audience to get to know you better, there's some importance in understanding your story from a young age.
Yeah.
I also think, like, I look at you and I interact with you, and I feel this hardened being. You know what I'm saying? Like, not to say that you're soulless, but I can look at you and I can feel that you've been through some stuff.
Yeah.
And so I want to try to get the audience there. You know, on the surface, it's one thing, but like when you actually interact with you and you actually hear some of the stories, you understand like where you've come from. It's like, okay, dude, there's a reason this guy is the way that he is, right? And so let's go there. I want to start with this. My understanding, you didn't grow up with a father in the home. Is that true?
That's true. So not a dad in the sense that everybody else would have a mom and a dad living in the house. I didn't have that. I would say I had a father figure as I grew up, but no actual dad in the house. Yeah.
Describe your childhood. How was it different than, what you might consider the norm in America?
Well, I mean, having a fairly normal dad life now, with 3 children and now a grandkid. What I would consider normal is, you all live in the same house. You interact with one another lovingly. Sometimes not so lovingly because we're family, but, for the most part, it's a loving environment, caring environment. Everybody kind of is working towards the same goal kind of thing. So that's what looks normal to me, or what I would perceive as normal in America, is that mom and dad, the kids, they all got, their own room, whatever. And for me, growing up was essentially my mom was my mother and father figure at home. And then I had, on my mom's side, I had my grandfather who really became my dad. And I spent a lot of time with him. So he became my male role model. But my mom was trying to make it work. And so we were living in Section 8 housing, government subsidized housing in a rough neighborhood. And she had to work nights because she was trying to, make a living and make a better life for us. And growing up in that environment, especially when I get into my teen years or tween years, young man, surrounded by gangs, surrounded by, dudes that appear to be cool, that can lend itself to trouble because mom's away, no father figure, nobody, staying at home by myself sometimes at night. And, having those guys out on the street that you can go hang out with and get in trouble with. That's kind of what my childhood looked like, was that mom working all the time and me just being a kid when I could.
Yeah. How does that end up manifesting? Like, how do you somehow avoid catastrophe at those pivotal 16, 17, 18 years when the majority of your friends, I think probably went a different direction?
Yeah. That was all mom. She kind of saw that train coming down the track. She knew, because she had grown up in that area too, in South Phoenix, and she knew that it was rough down there. She knew the neighborhood we lived in was rough. She knew what was going on. And when I was I was a freshman, and my freshman year, she said, we're moving out to a farming area that's way outside of the Phoenix area, out in the East Valley. And so we moved out to Queen Creek. And I know that is what saved me from going down the road, because at that point, freshman in high school, 2 of my friends had already been shot. One of my friends was getting ready to go away for a double homicide. And it was all, part of where they're caught up in that gang stuff there. So mom broke me out of that. And tell people I had a weird dynamic going on, because on one side you have your friends. That's a strong pull at that age, right? Your friends are a lot of influence for you and they're pulling you. On the other side, I had my mom's family that were really traditional values, hunting, fishing, that kind of stuff. So I had a grandpa, like I said, that was my father figure, who would take me hunting, fishing, outdoors. And then I had aunts and uncles on that side that would do the same. So I had this weird phenomenon going on where I had really strong family on my mom's side helping shape me. And on the other side, I was being shaped by the streets and gangsters. And so it was a weird morphing. And I stayed out of trouble because where we lived, you didn't have to be in a gang. It was all around you, and it was easy to fall into that. And I just managed to survive and not get involved. And at the time my mom got me out of there, that would have been the time that I probably would have went down that path, because all of my buddies were starting to get in trouble in that stuff. And a lot of times people don't understand how easy it is to get caught up. I got jumped a couple times, and it wasn't because I was part of any gang. It was because of who my friends were. And a couple of them were part of a gang, and you're guilty by association, whether you like it or not. So if you're from this neighborhood and if that dude's your friend, you're part of them. And even if you don't have the tattoos, even if you're not banging and doing all the stuff that they're doing, you're still part of that. And so it's very easy to get wrapped up in that.
You get out of South Phoenix, you go to Queen Creek, eventually you become an adult, 20 years old, you end up somehow, some way stumbling into what would become, your career for the next 30 years. So at 20, how did you get exposure to, was it military? Was it police? What happened at 20?
Well, my now wife of 30 years ended up pregnant, and she was my girlfriend then. We went to high school together. We are the original Queen Creek Bulldogs. I'm going to throw that out there. And so went to high school together. She ended up pregnant. I had a life decision to make, right? And I had always had an affinity. My grandfather was a World War II vet, so was my grandmother. I had always had an affinity towards military. And I dealt with law enforcement quite a bit in my neighborhood, right? They were naturally there. So I interacted with them. And quite frankly, my interactions with Phoenix PD were always really good. Like they were just cool dudes. And we had cool interactions with them. So I had that affinity. I had a pregnant wife, and I had a desire to serve and a desire to make it for my family, right? And so at 20 years old, I started applying, and Pinal County was the first to offer me a job, and I've been there ever since.
So I want to get into some of these stories. Pinal County, for those who don't know, is a county in the southern part of Arizona that borders Mexico, right?
No, we don't actually border Mexico. We're about 50 miles off the border. So we have a county in between. But generally speaking, I just tell people we're smashed right in between Phoenix and Tucson.
Yeah. And you've dealt with the border as part of Pinal County to support that other county, or because they make it in and then they're coming up through Pinal?
It's Pinal is geographically, it's very important to the cartels, because that portion of our county, so the southwest portion of our county, is wide open desert from the county line all the way down to Mexico.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is Indian reservation. So just wide open desert, nothing stopping them. And so our county really becomes the first civilization that the cartels hit. That's the line we kind of try to hold.
Yeah. Yeah. So I want to get into some of these stories. I think these are stories that people would find pretty fascinating. Let me ask you this. What is maybe the most common misconception about the border and people illegally entering the US that the majority of people who watch mainstream media wouldn't know?
Oh man. I think at this point, one of the main stories that we hear that is false is that they're just coming here for a better life, right? And what we see is not those people. I understand those people. I've dealt with this, my whole life, my whole career. And yes, it used to be that there was an influx of people coming here for a better life. But what we deal with now are military age males that are involved in specific things, i.e. transporting drugs or transporting other people, trafficking them. And that is the bulk of what we deal with. So it's not just these poor people escaping something. It is a criminal organization that holds full control of that area.
And these are dangerous people.
Oh yeah, they are dangerous. They have unlimited resources, unlimited money, and their violence level is through the roof. They don't care about human life, dude.
Yeah, I would say that's a extreme misconception of what's happening at the border. Let's talk about some of those.
Okay.
Where do you want to start? What would be like an appropriate story to start discussing some of what's happening at the border?
Well, it's hard to say. Like it's hard to start with a story. I think as we're talking about misconceptions, I think where we could start is this. People need to have an understanding that illegal immigration gets lumped into this phrase. Like that's the phrase they use, right? Illegal immigration. And it's so much more than that. It's not just illegal immigrants coming through. It's rape, it's murder, it's extortion, it's drug trafficking, it's human trafficking. It's all these crimes that are taking place in essentially that no man's land. And so you have this criminal organization that is hell-bent on making their money and holding their power, and they're using American soil to further their activities. And there's all that going on out there. And there's so many stories within that. I mean, because there's people behind it, right? So you're talking about cops that are fighting that. You're talking about cartel members that are trying to further their organization. You're talking about illegal immigrants who are the people that are just trying to get a better life, but they're being exploited by the criminal organization. So there's just all this stuff that is connected to that term.
Yeah. You ever had to kill somebody?
No. I luckily, because I really don't know how I would handle that. I have had to try to kill somebody, and then he ended up killing himself. So we shot at each other, and he was shooting at us a lot, and I was trying to get rounds back on him, and I did not hit him, and then he ultimately ended up shooting himself.
What was that interaction like? What was that for? What led up to that moment when he took his own life?
So that was a SWAT call. So what short version of how we got there was a domestic violence call that he had been involved in with his wife and son. And ultimately he, what we call barricaded. So he was in the house and said, "I'm not coming out." And he started fortifying himself in there. And it wasn't actually a house. It was like a Greyhound bus. And so I was on our SWAT team. I was a team leader on our SWAT team. We got called out for SWAT. We surrounded it. We had negotiations going. We had some dialogue going with him at some point, but he was very agitated. He was an older gentleman. He was in his 70s, Vietnam vet. Later found out he had cancer, and he was very pissed off. And we got to a point where negotiations had broke down, and we introduced gas to try and get him out of where he was holed up. And the moment that I was one of the guys shooting the gas rounds in, and the moment that I started shooting those rounds of gas into that bus, he started shooting at us with an AK, shotgun. I think he had a 45 handgun. And so essentially he just went to war with us. As soon as we launched gas, he started firing on us. He started firing on other team members that were in different positions. And we went in a back and forth shootout for, it had to be 5 or 10 minutes. We were going at it with each other. We were in an elevated position. So we were trying to get him. He was trying to get us. A sniper was trying to get him, but he was very good at what he was doing. And then that all took place. And as we went forward from that point, from that initial shooting, more negotiations, more talk, more gas. And ultimately, it ended up being about an 8 to 10 hour standoff. I don't remember exactly how long, but towards the end of that, we heard one final shot, and or what sounded like a shot. And ultimately, no communications for a while, and we had to go in the bus. And when we punched the door open to get in the bus, he was laying there, and he had a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the head. So he had shot himself, and we really don't know, why he made that choice, other than the desperation he felt at that point. Because, when people do something like that, then they feel it's all a lost cause. Like, I've messed up so horribly that now I have to do this. And so
my life's already over.
Right.
I might as well just finish it.
Yeah.
Have you had to, my understanding is you've had to deal with the cartel. I want to ask the same question about the cartel. You watch Narcos, you watch these shows, and I actually hear that some of these are relatively accurate.
Narcos is very accurate.
And so if you've seen that, but I still think a lot of people don't believe that's accurate. I think they think, well, it's probably not as crazy as Hollywood's making it out to be or whatever. But, any friends that I have that have had interactions with cartel say, like, these are just, there's no words to describe the viciousness of these organizations and these people that are involved in these things. How would you describe the Mexican cartels?
Evil bastards. My wife's Mexican, right? And my kids are half Mexican. My wife's family is from a small town called Ojinaga, Chihuahua. Ojinaga is cartel land. They're deep down there.
Chihuahua is pretty serious. Yeah.
Yeah. And in that area, that Ojinaga area is notorious for some of the top brass being in and around and from that area. So I've seen what they've done to their own people. I watch, in our county, what they do to their own people. And evil bastards is just what comes to mind every time I think of them, because they are literally soulless. Like when you talk about a group of individuals that could take a fellow human being and skin them alive just to prove a point that I'm better than you, I just don't understand.
And not even miss a beat.
No, it's just another day for them. They'll do that, and then they'll go have dinner afterwards with their family. And they'll go to church on Sunday, So people do not understand how vicious they are, soulless they are, and how little they value human life. And I think people want to have other humans be good. I think we kind of root for each other. Like, it can't be that bad, right? There's nothing that can be that bad, because we kind of root for each other to do better, be better. And when it comes to these guys, it is that bad. Like, whatever you think or however bad you think they are, they're worse. Just because of how they think, and how they act and how they treat human beings.
Yeah. You got into a stolen car chase with the cartel. It's my understanding. And tell me about that experience.
Been in a few of those, actually, but the one you're talking about, I think we're talking about one where we almost ended up, as part of that chase, we almost ended up killing another cop. And it was a normal thing. This was probably the 2009, 10, 11 era, when we refer to it as the Wild West days, because the southern deserts of Arizona were just infested with cartels. I mean, they still are, but this was just different. They were everywhere. We were constantly in chases, and stolen vehicles was like an hourly thing almost, right? And so we're working at night. We're working in an area that we know is a smuggling route, and we see what we call a blacked out vehicle. So no lights on, just hauling ass. And that's a pretty good indicator. I mean, like even the FBI would call that a clue, right? So blacked out vehicle going through the desert. We decided we're going to go after it. So we're running under night vision. So we would be blacked out too so that they couldn't see us, but we're driving with night vision on. So we're trying to catch up to this vehicle because as we're going, it became apparent that they were headed back to Mexico. And so typically what they would do is they would take these stolens back to Mexico, load them with drugs, and then shuttle them. And that was an all-night thing. They would just shuttle drugs back and forth in stolens. So going through farm fields, making our way to the reservation actually to go southbound. And we're trying to catch them, and they don't know we're behind them initially. But then as we get closer, they figure out that something is following them, right? I don't think they quite knew what, but they knew that somebody was chasing them. And so the chase is really on now. So now they're driving it like they stole it, literally. And as this is happening, we're not on the normal radio. We're not on the normal police radio. We're doing all this stuff on side channels. We're talking car to car and stuff like that. So the normal cops, like your cop that's patrolling the neighborhood and all that, they have no idea that this chase is going on in their area because all this stuff just kind of takes place under the surface. And so we're chasing, and we're coming to an area where they're going to cross a main road. And we don't know if they're going to go down the main road and run further south towards the res, or if they're going to cross over and go further into the desert. But we're probably a quarter mile behind them at this point because we're trying to give them some distance so that we don't push them too hard. And as they're going, we can see a vehicle southbound on this main road. And we're looking at the physics of it, and we're like, uh-oh. And so the bad guy car and the what ended up being a cop car are about to intersect. And one of them knows that there's another car coming. The cop does not know there's a blacked out vehicle about to meet them in the middle of the road. And so by the grace of God, and I mean, I still don't know to this day how they did not hit each other, but the patrol car passed where they would intersect, and like just a half second passed by, and the blacked out vehicle crosses over and just blows by right behind them. They slam on their brakes up because, they know something just happened. They just don't know what, because they heard the clatter of the stolen vehicle fly by behind them. And I'm sure they saw a flash of something. And so we're just like, oh my God, because, for us, the problem would have been that we really would have caused that because we were pushing them. We didn't call it out on the radio. Had we called it out on the radio, that cop would have known what was going on. Yeah. So we almost took out one of our own. And of course, then we jumped up on the radio and, told everybody what was going on, where we were at and all that. But that one was a little bit spicy. And that was a huge learning lesson for us on how we communicate, when we communicate.
At what point do you just drop that call? Do you just let them go? I mean, sounds like in this case, did you end up getting them, arresting them?
We got the vehicle, which was typical. And that was kind of the thing, right? Typically those chases, we were designed for that. That was our function. Our function was to go interdict cartel. And so whether that be getting their stolen vehicles that they're using to run the drugs, whether it's getting bad guys, whether it's getting drugs, our intent was to disrupt or dismantle their organization. So we would have chased that thing all the way to Mexico, and I'd be lying if I told you that I haven't been in Mexico by accident. Yeah. So we would have chased it all the way. And typically what happens with those is those drivers are pretty good, but they don't have the equipment we have and some of the technology we have. And so we always typically had a hand up on them, and they would eventually hit a point where the terrain was too rough and they would just have to abandon the vehicle, or they wreck and they would have abandoned the vehicle.
Yeah.
And that's what happened in this case. They got ahead of us a little bit. They hit terrain that they couldn't get through, and they just abandoned the vehicle and left it there. And then we recover a stolen. And typically that's a phone call to a vehicle owner in Phoenix, asking them if they know where their truck is, and they have no idea that it was stolen. And there we go.
Yeah. Yeah, that's wild. MS-13, is this, in your mind, the most dangerous gang organization in the world?
I mean, obviously the Cartel is right up there, but as far as street gangs go, yeah, MSers are just different. They are very much like Cartel in the sense that they do not value human life at all. And when you deal with like the gangsters I grew up with, right? Hispanic gangs, there are a few black gangs in our area or neighborhood. But Hispanic gangs still had a family sense, if that makes sense. So the gang thing was just part of where we grew up. But they had families, they had barbecues, they had, normal life stuff. MSers are different. Like they don't value human life. Their family is the gang, and they are some of the most violent gangsters I've ever dealt with. And they really feel like they're untouchable. And so that makes them really dangerous.
Yeah. What sort of run-ins have you had with them? I know you have a story about kind of a face-to-face moment with a MS-13 gang member.
Yeah. Typically, like in the smuggling realm, they would be involved in some of the smuggling groups. So they would run a group. And when I say a group, what we deal with a lot, dealt with back in that time frame, still happens today, is you have people either on foot or in vehicles that are transporting the drugs up, right? And so you'll have MSers mixed in there with that because they're opportunistic. So they're trying to make money on the transports, or sometimes it's their drugs that they're transporting up and they've paid the fee to the cartel to use that area. And the one MSer that sticks out in my mind is the one you're talking about. That was a group of packers. And so they were packing up drugs, and we had been tracking them with technology, and we knew the route they were taking. And so we were essentially deploying one of our teams ahead of them to get in front of them and to catch them as they came through, to intercept them. And as they came through that area, we're set up. We do the takedown. We get them all in custody. And this particular guy, he was the one I took into custody. And when you bust a group like that, it goes from like a quiet desert to pure chaos in seconds. And there's yelling, there's screaming. You'll see flashlights, the flash bangs. There's just all this chaos going on, right? And we're still under night vision. And so this particular guy, he was running towards me, and I turn on white light and light him up, and I start giving him orders in Spanish to get on his knees. And he's not listening, and so I help him get on his knees very quickly using violence, quite frankly. And I get him in custody, and when I pick him up, I stand him up, and we bring them all to one area so that we can start identifying them and debriefing them. And we had a person with us that was filming, and they were filming just to capture what goes on, on some of these takedowns and operations. And so I knew, like, the guy was just, he was staring through me, if that makes sense, right? When he looked at me, he was just looking right through me, and he was tracking me the entire time. And his eyes were locked on me. And I showed my wife the video, and my wife was like, "That dude is evil." And I said, "Oh yeah." I said, when I interacted with him face to face, I could just feel, you interact with some of these guys and you still have a sense of humanity in them. I can't even describe it. You can just tell that they're still a normal dude. They're just committing crimes, right?
Yeah.
And they would probably kill you if given the right circumstances,
Yeah.
but they're not necessarily going to go out of their way to kill you. This dude just exuded evil. Like I could feel the evil. I could see the evil in his eyes. And he would track me. And then at one point I made eye contact with him because again, I understood gangsters. I understood machismo, and I understood in my heart, the whole death thing. And so at some point I made eye contact with him face to face, and I just smiled at him and I said, "What's up, buddy?" And he gave me the, like, "I would kill you right now if you take these handcuffs off" look. And I knew he wanted to. And my wife even caught it on film. She's like, "That dude is evil and he wants to kill you." I said, "Oh yeah, he hated me." And he just sticks out. I can still, like, as I describe this to you, I can see his face when we locked eyes, and I cut a smile, and he didn't break rank at all. He just gave me the most go to hell look I've ever had in my career.
Have you followed what El Salvador's president is doing at all?
Yeah, I've watched that, which
that is wild.
It is wild.
And you see some of the documentary footage and stuff, and you see these guys, these MS-13 guys, and they've got these big tattoos across their chest and their back, and they zoom in close on these guys' face, and there's not a lot of life in these guys.
And if you talk to any of them that are willing to talk, they are doing such evil things that they just become soulless, man. I mean, there's no way you can do the stuff that because they're doing the same stuff the cartels are doing. They're skinning people alive. They're chopping them up, doing all this stuff. There's no way you can keep your soul if you're doing that kind of stuff.
What do you think about his President Bukele's approach to the way that he's taking over and controlling crime? I mean, do you think it's right? Do you think it is effective?
Oh, it's very effective.
You think we could do something like that in Arizona, for example? Or even just in the U.S.?
We got this thing called the Constitution that really would get in the way of doing business like that. Because and I believe me, I love the Constitution and what it's designed for, but when it comes to criminals, it does it allows them to exploit it. And so I think what he's doing down there, could we do it? Yes. It would take the American people essentially saying we've had enough, and this is how we choose to deal with criminals. Yeah. And how he's dealing with them is very effective. The problem is it becomes a slippery slope. So if you pay attention to what they're doing down there, it becomes very Nazi-like in the sense that they're going into villages, and on suspicion of you might be connected, they're just sacking you up and taking you to a prison, and no due process.
Ask questions later. Yeah.
Right. And so that becomes a slippery slope, because then you just start locking up people you don't like, right? Instead of actual criminals. I think what he's doing to the identified, verified criminals, 100%, like that's how they should be treated. Yeah. Those kind of criminals, those hardcore dudes, because people who haven't grown up in this environment or been exposed to it don't understand that they don't speak many languages in a gang environment. Violence is one of the languages they purely understand. And so when you completely dominate somebody that is like that, and you control their every movement, you have taken away their power, and you're never going to make them not dangerous, but you can control that. And how he's doing that is very effective in controlling those dangerous people. But there's a lot more to it than just what you see on the surface, right? And then you have to, the humanity side comes in again too, because you take away all the face tattoos and all that stuff, and that is still somebody's kid, right? And it's still somebody's brother, maybe father. And if there's a hope that we could get them functioning again as a normal human being and away from that environment, I always think that's a plus. I would never want to just lock a bunch of people away and just say forever forget about them.
Yeah. You ever been a part of accidents in your career that where you lost teammates that
Yep.
could have easily been you, sort of situation?
Oh yeah. Tate is he was a teammate on SWAT, and he got killed in a training accident that was we were doing rappelling off of our jail in Florence, and it was 3 stories. And in Tate's instance, I was supposed to go down the rope. One of our buddies in common and I were up at the top. Tate was up at the top, and people were coming down. We were just practicing rappelling, and I was due to come up, and for whatever reason, I said, nah, I don't feel like going down today. I'm just, because I didn't need to go down. It was just like, if you wanted to. And so I said, nah, I'm good. I'm just going to go down to the bottom for whatever reason. And so the buddy I was with, he was hooking in already. I was going to go next. I said, no, I'm cool. I'll go down. He's hooking in. We go downstairs. I get downstairs. When he went down, he had a little bit of an issue with the equipment because it was a self-belaying system. And so he had an issue. He got stuck. We helped him down, got him off the rope, and then Tate was next. And then Tate, when he came off the side, if you know anything about rappelling, you get off the side, you kind of get in your L formation where your legs are on the building and locked out, and you're kind of upright and you have that L formation. And then you check everything, you get all your clearance to go, and then you head down. Tate did all that, all the checks, and then he let loose and with the device. And as he let loose with the device, he started going down, and he was accelerating really quickly. And so much so that me and another guy at the bottom were like, what's he doing? And then by the time he got about halfway down, and he was really accelerating, and that was an oh shit moment for us. And so we jump up and we start to try and take some kind of action, because there was what would be belay ropes were coming back towards us. But being a self-belay system, what would be a normal belay rope had no effect, because the system was self-belaying on a single rope. So the second rope had no effect on stopping him. Nonetheless, we grabbed the rope, tried to slow him down. It didn't do anything. And he hit the deck full speed. So he essentially, as soon as he let go from the top, he took a full ride 3 stories and hit his back. And so as soon as he hit the deck, we ran over. We got him clear of, we cleared the ropes, got them out of the way, and I drug him he was in between some stuff, so we kind of drug him to a clearing, and he was already convulsing, and his eyes had already started to swell shut. And he ended up dying at the hospital later that night. So we got him flown out from there, and got him to the hospital. They kept him alive essentially to get his organs and stuff. And he ended up dying. And the weird thing was about that whole incident that I didn't include in that is on the way to the hospital, I called my wife and I said, hey, I'm headed to the hospital. And she says, okay, I'm headed there too. And I'm like, damn, how does she know already? Because it literally just happened, and we're hauling butt up to Scottsdale. And I said, okay, well, like, how do you know it happened? And she said, well, my sister called me. And so I'm like, your sister called you, right? So I'm totally lost at this point. I'm like, how's their sister know? And she said, I don't know what room he's in, but they're headed up there too. I'm like, what are you talking about? And she said, my dad had a stroke and he's being flown to Scottsdale. And I'm like, oh my God. I said, well, Tate had an accident and Tate's being flown to Scottsdale. And so they both get flown to the same hospital and end up being in rooms next to each other. So I was going back we're in Tate's room. with his family, and then I'd go over to my father-in-law's room with our family, and we did that back and forth, and they ended up dying within a few days of each. Tate died that night, and then my father-in-law died a few days later, and so yeah, that was a tough one, man. That one kept me down for quite a few years.
My father-in-law is a longtime Phoenix PD. Started in, would have been around 88 and retired 4 or 5 years ago. Was in a near fatal, he was a motor officer, did graveyard shifts, was in a near fatal accident. I actually knew him at this time. I was 8 years old. He was my Sunday school teacher at church. And he was the coolest teacher because he would bring every kid in our class, there was maybe 8 to 10 of us, full bags of Skittles every week.
Nice.
So he'd go to the store during his shift the night before, he'd pick up Skittles, and then he'd go straight from his shift that ended at 8 a.m. over to church. He would teach our class, and then he'd go home and go to sleep. And he was in this accident, and he doesn't show up to church, and all these years later, I ended up marrying his daughter, right? So I've known my wife since we were little kids, 2 and 3 years old, but I just remember her. She talks about, she's got some trauma still from when she was 7 and this accident happened, and 2 a.m, get the knock on the door, that dreaded knock on the door that her mom would lay up sleepless at night thinking about that day.
Oh yeah.
And they get that knock, and basically, Mrs. Campbell, it doesn't look like he's going to make it.
Right.
And so she goes into the hospital and ends up being broke his pelvis and his back and all sorts of major injuries, and is in a coma, and ended up living through all this. And so he's on medical leave for a while, but eventually gets back on his feet. And at this time, they were building the VCU at Phoenix, the Vehicular Crimes Unit. And he was I think he actually might have been the first VCU detective, and then spent the last, let's call it 15 years of his career doing vehicular crimes detective work. And so, what that means is his job, for those listening, is he is, if there's a fatal accident, an accident involving a death, before anyone can do anything, a detective, an investigator, has to be there to investigate the scene.
Right.
And that was his job, right? So every day he's getting called out to go and investigate dead bodies, people who had died in motor vehicle accidents. I still don't know how you do that sort of job, right? Because not only are you're dealing with dead bodies every day, moments after they take their last breath, but then you're responsible for, after you write up the scene, going to the family's home and telling them that they've lost their father, their mother, their son, their brother, their sister, their child. And that's, I can't imagine that. Have you had experiences involving fatal traffic accidents as well? Have you had any close calls in your career?
I've had a few close calls. Yeah. Obviously driving under night vision is a little bit different. Had a few close calls there. And then just police driving in general. You're driving fast, you're going through intersections. So there's a lot of exposure to being in an accident, a catastrophic accident. And I was a motor as well. And I've almost been killed on a motorcycle too. So a lot of close calls. And again, I can only attribute it to not my time, because, one slight turn this way and I was dead, but I went that way. But fatal accidents, I also was a fatal accident investigator. And so I know exactly what you're talking about. You deal with a lot of that. And my wife now, we've been married 31 years. I've been in the job 31 years, so she's been with me for the whole ride. And we talk more now about it. It was kind of one of those things you just don't talk about as we were married, as we went through our early adult life. Um, like she understood that I could die any day that I went to work, right? And then she also knew, because I chose to do even more dangerous stuff within the field of police work, being on SWAT and stuff like that, that I would just get called out in the middle of the night. So it would be, this is going to date me, but a pager would go off or a cell phone would go off, and I would be up getting dressed, and she would halfway wake up for a kiss goodbye. And then, what I didn't know at the time, but what she would go through at the time was then staying up the rest of the night, right, until she heard some kind of news as to, are we okay? Is everything okay? Are we coming home? So there's a lot of that goes on, a lot of that, I think, trauma that the family deals with. And then you as an officer, I mean, I was talking to my therapist because I have one now, and I never thought I'd say that as a young cop, but the older I got, the more I embraced that. But in talking to my therapist, I just kind of bounced off of her because I'd look at the statistics here and there. But a normal person, like a normal human being, is exposed to one, maybe two traumatic events in their life. Sometimes it's them directly. Sometimes it's exposure from something else. And in this field of work, depending on where you work, what job you do, it can range anywhere from 10 traumatic events in your life up to 900. And the average being right around 200. So most of us as cops have had at least 200 traumatic events, which is about 200 times more than everybody else in the world, right? And people don't understand that trauma is just not like there's been a couple times where somebody's tried to kill me, and that's traumatic. There's been times where I've had to try to kill somebody, and that's traumatic. There's been times where I've witnessed things. I've witnessed an accident. I've witnessed a lady burned to death, and we couldn't do anything for her. And she's screaming for our help, and we have to watch her burn to death. That's very traumatic. Watching my buddy fall to his death is traumatic. And so those to me are very significant traumatic experiences. But there's also, you get this weird kind of secondary exposure to even hearing about other calls, because you've been on so many calls in your career, especially a 30-year career. You've been on so many calls that you'll hear somebody else describe the call they're on or what they're dealing with, and that can be traumatic because it brings up a traumatic event that you dealt with, right? And so you'll end up
Put
having
yourself
trauma.
in their shoes,
yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's just one of those jobs. And to your original question, I don't know how you do it. You just do. You pack all that stuff in a closet and you hope nobody opens the door. And what I know now from 30 years of doing that is that doesn't work. Like you can pack stuff in that closet, but eventually the door's coming open. And sometimes, as you saw at the beginning of this, for whatever reason, the question you asked me triggered something in me. Open that closet and emotions come flowing out, right? And so you find yourself, from all the stuff you deal with in this career, you become very hardened, very angry, very short fused. And that's the emotional side. And then you look at statistically, we die within 5 years of retirement, and it's usually heart attack. So our hearts undergo, trauma, and they're just the cortisol, the adrenaline dumps, the insulin resistance, everything that happens to our body. So as we get older in our career, most of us we're either pre-diabetic or have diabetes. We have coronary problems. Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So it wears on you, and I don't know how you do it. You just do. You really just put that stuff to the side and you go to work. I don't know how to explain it.
Have you ever seriously considered suicide?
No, I've never. Like in my mind, that's that's and I'm not anybody who, I don't want them to misconstrue this, because I don't want to discount the fact that I understand how you get there, but to me that was a coward's way out. That's how I viewed it, and so I never really considered it, because I always thought like that would make me a coward, and I'm never going to do that. What I did was tried to get killed, right? So I didn't want to do it myself, but I would do the most dangerous shit I could find.
An honorable discharge of life.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have friends that have committed suicide after having been...
Knock on wood, I have not.
Wow.
I haven't had any in a long career of friends. So I take it back. Outside the career, I had friends. In high school, I had a friend that committed suicide.
Yeah.
But in this career, no, not somebody that was like in my direct circle of friends, but there are plenty in this career that I know that have. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think you talked about this veteran that you got in the shootout with, 70 years old, a life full of bad thoughts and trauma, which leads to deep suicide and depression. And, all the way to the point where he decides, I'm going to get into a shootout with SWAT and then I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to take my own life. And I don't know the exact statistics. I wish I had them handy, but I know that the suicide rate among veterans is higher than it's ever been in the history of the world. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that. I think a big one is just, I think we do a lot of things to help retired public safety members and military, but I think we could do a lot more to really encourage our public safety members, police, fire, military, to get help, when they get out. And a lot of times I think you become so hardened that you've got to just be tough. You got to tough it out. And sometimes that's not enough. And usually it's not enough, right? So I appreciate you bringing up the fact that you do therapy. I think it's, I want to normalize therapy. Right. I do therapy. I've been through some traumatic events, and even if you don't think you have,
right, yeah,
you could, no matter what your profession is, you could chalk it up as, no, I don't have trauma.
Right.
It's like, you don't know until you actually sit down with somebody who starts asking you about your life. And then you realize, dude, I've got trauma dating back to the time I was just a young man. Right. So, how do you deal with, aside from therapy? I mean, what are some of the things that you do to deal with mental health and anxiety and depression in your life?
Oh man, I've been exploring all kinds of modalities lately. So over the last 5 years, I've really dove into it. Prior to that, I would say probably my outlets were, I've always been a gym guy. The gym is kind of my sanctuary. To stay healthy, because I know the statistics are working against me, right? So to stay healthy, but to also, I don't know what it is about gym time. Well, I do know what it is. I mean, it's the physiology behind it, but, going in there and just throwing those weights around or doing the cardio or whatever and working that out has always been a thing for me. Hunting, fishing, outdoors has always been a good way for me to just get away, from the world and see what God meant us to see. And I think over the past, probably, I'm going to say like 6 years, I've really started to dive into it, because what I know is, when I touched on the mental health stuff, what I know for myself is that I consider myself a tough guy, right? I've been through some stuff. I've been in some fights. People have tried to kill me, and I've had to deal with that. And I've been punched. I've been knocked out. I've been stabbed. I've been shot at. So I think I'm a fairly tough dude. But what I found was that I had zero control over that stuff. And what I mean is that all of a sudden I found myself claustrophobic, and I had never been claustrophobic in my life. And all of a sudden getting on an elevator was a struggle. Getting in a plane and having them shut the door was a struggle, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, what is wrong with me, man? Like, this has never bothered me. Why is this bothering me? I'm not a wuss. And then what brought it all home for me was the first time I had a heart attack that wasn't a heart attack. And the doctor sat there and told me, no, you had a panic attack. And I'm like, I'm not a pussy, dude. Don't like you have a panic attack.
No way.
Yeah. And so when that happened, he's like, that's not how it works, man. You know, it doesn't matter how tough you are. Here's what happens physiologically to you. And so we worked through that and figured out that I had indeed had a panic attack. And I'm like, what is going on with me, right? And so luckily I had a good buddy that told me, bro, you're all jacked up. You need some help, right? So that's when I started seeing a therapist. And then when you go see the therapist and they start diving into what's behind the changes in behavior or you know, what you're seeing as changes, they start diving into that, and you start, it's almost like your budget, right? You think you're good with your budget until you sit down and do a budget, right? And you start actually lining out where you're spending your money and what you're wasting money on. Then you're like, oh man, well, when you do that with life, and that's what's happening when you're sitting down with a therapist, you're just kind of going through like, here's some of the stuff. And then all of a sudden you're like, holy cow, man, like that's a big list of stuff that I have. And then they educate you on how that works, right? When you hold all that stuff in, that eventually the cup's full and it's going to overflow. And so you have to start emptying that cup. And the therapist really did that for me and provided me ways to start emptying that cup on a normal basis so it doesn't fill back up. And I'm a much less angry person now. It was easy for me to go off, and the problem is you typically go off on the people you love, right? Which is just counterintuitive anyways. But that's typically where it rears its ugly head is, you know, I'm trying to be a good dad. I'm trying to be a good husband. And because of the stressors and because of that cup filling up, you then lash out at your family first when you have those anger issues. And so as I started addressing all that, a lot more calmness in my life, a lot more less angry, and then getting back to God, quite frankly, was one of the biggest things I could do, because I think for me, I was constantly trying to fill a void, and you can never fill it, and you don't know why. And then when I got back to my faith, I was like, oh, well, there it is. Like, that's what I needed right there. And I think it will make me emotional again. I think that connecting with faith was really reconnecting with humanity and, you know, how we're supposed to interact as human beings, because I had been exposed to everything but that, right? Through the career and through life, I had been exposed to how bad humans are towards each other. And I think faith takes all that away. Sorry. And you got me twice, dude. Yeah, but faith was huge because it reconnected that humanity for me, and softened my heart. And I tell people all the time, like at my church, I serve in children's, and I thought I started serving because the kids needed me. It was the other way around.
Yeah.
I needed them.
Yeah.
Man. Tough guys aren't supposed to cry, dude.
I think the toughest ones do.
You weren't lying when you said roller coaster.
Yeah, not just the roller coaster of your life, but just this hour together.
Yeah.
So, let me see it.
Yep.
I guess it's not a new book anymore. I mean, it still sort of is, right?
Yeah, I mean, November 2022, so now 2 years old. Yeah.
Okay, a couple years ago, you released your new book.
Yes.
And it's called Interceptors: The Untold Fight Against the Mexican Cartels.
Yeah.
I'm going to read what you wrote on the back, and then I want you to share why you wrote the book.
Okay.
And why somebody might be interested in reading it. Okay. So here's what you wrote. You said, Interceptors is the true account of the battle against the infamous Sinaloa cartel on American soil as told by Deputy Sheriff from Pinal County, Arizona. The author, Matt Thomas, is an Arizona native born and raised in Phoenix. As a youth, he lived in an area dominated by gangs and drugs and grew up immersed in the Mexican culture. As an adult, Matt began working for the Pinal County Sheriff's Office in 1993, working patrol, undercover, and SWAT. Matt has been directly involved in and led operations countering the Mexican cartels and has continued to fight the battle for over 20 years. Interceptors details Matt's experience as a youth, the structure and culture of the cartels, and the operations he was involved in to counter the cartels. What do you want the world to know about this book?
Well, if they want the no BS rendition of what's going on or what has actually taken place on U.S. soil as it relates to the fight that law enforcement has against the cartels, this book is going to be for them. So they'll get an understanding. I kind of lay the groundwork in the beginning of who I am so that they understand why I can speak to what I'm speaking about. So a little bit on who I am, how I grew up, and then I go into the structure and culture of the cartels to give them an understanding of how they view things and how they treat things. And then we go into the operations themselves. And the driving push behind writing this was because I really did understand that, looking back, this was a piece of U.S. history that took place that a lot of people have no understanding of, right? They may not even know that it took place, or they don't understand how it took place and the things we were doing to kind of fight this criminal organization. And so I wanted to get that information out there. I wanted to memorialize it. And quite frankly, I worked with some absolute heroes that were in these operations, and I wanted to highlight the stuff that they did.
Beautifully said. Matt, I appreciate you coming on, sharing your stories, and it's amazing, man. Keep fighting the good fight and being a good example. I know you've only got a year or so left, and then you'll be full-time grandpa, which would be amazing. So I really appreciate it, and just want to say thank you as well for your service to our community, to our country. It really means a lot to me personally and my family. So thank you.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.